Until recently, in classical and other texts, the sexual parts were routinely left untranslated. In Roman literature, the rude bits were left in Latin. It was thought that such passages might be safely entrusted to either clergymen or scholars, but ought not be made available to the hoi polloi and the untrained. Few texts have suffered so much censorship and have been left so untranslated as the Hypernerotomachia Polyphili. It is now available in a good English translation by Jocelyn Godwin. It took until the 1990s, but for centuries it was a guarded text, and only a very few and a very selected translations appeared. In the manuscript copies, such as those in the hands of the Roman Church, the illustrations were subject to selective oversight as well, where they were not simply blotted out. The work, The Dream of Strife in Love, is an erotic, indeed hyper-erotic, work of the Quattrocento, and though obscure and esoteric, has always been regarded as a book best not shown to the public at large. It is famous or infamous, but has never been widely distributed. There are still important languages into which it's not been translated. It might be useful to introduce it here. Its author is officially anonymous. It was published in a magnificent edition, one of the wonders of early printing, in Italy, Venice, 1499. The letter capitals of each chapter, however, spell out the name Francesco Colonna, and it is widely believed to be his composition. The publisher, Aldus Manutius, denied this, and others have seen the hand of the great architect and polymath Leon Battista Alberti in it. Another name put forward is Botticelli. Colonna seems the strongest candidate, but officially we don't know, and by officially I mean the author deliberately left it unsigned. The printer, Aldus, in fact, didn't even meet the author, but printed the work by commission from a member of the church curia, who insisted that he himself was not the author. This distancing is not surprising, given the nature of the content. It concerns an erotic dream. Indeed, it concerns a dream within a dream, both of them erotic. Our hero, Polyfilo, the lover of many things, seeks his beloved Polia and sleeps restlessly, an erotic restlessness, because she has denied him. The complication is that she is dedicated to Diana and has promised to become a virgin priestess. Polyfilo suffers from erotomania. His dream is populated with his erotic obsessions, most notably various forms of architecture and architectural decorations which he fetishizes as erotic objects. In the dream within the dream, he is escorted by nymphs to find Polia, and their reunion is celebrated by various triumphal processions on the way to a temple. The goddess Venus herself blesses their union, but sure enough, just as Polyfilo embraces Polia and their love is about to be consummated, he wakes up from the dream. The work is illustrated by over 160 very fine woodcuts. It seems the work, the novel, it's a novel, was written by Colonna and completed in around 1469, but was not published with illustrations until 30 years later. There were 600 copies made initially. It sold poorly. A French edition with extra woodcuts published in the 1540s and often republished is probably the most widely known edition. The work received kind attention in France, where it was better known than in the English-speaking world. Both the woodcuts and the narrative make it clear that, aside from its erotic dimension, it is in fact a work about architecture. The author's interests are architectural, and yet those interests have been embedded in this dream narrative. For reasons unexplained, it's an architectural treatise cast as Polyfilo's wet dream. Why someone would do this is the question. It is generally regarded as an allegory. Very often it has been regarded as an alchemical allegory, or is taken as having some other esoteric agenda. The agenda cannot be trivial or merely titillating, though. It is a carefully crafted work, cryptic, elusive, textured, the work of a very learned and subtle mind. But here turned to a deeply erotic theme. It is, in short and remarkably, a treatise on the erotic appreciation of the forms of architecture. Everything suggests it has other dimensions too. The text itself was written in a strange concocted hybrid of Latin and vernacular Italian, with intrusions of Greek and Hebrew and Arabic. In the original, it's all a bit unfathomable. All the textual tricks of the Italian Renaissance are on show. If the narrative seems allegorical, the language in which it's cast is cryptic, hermetic and encoded. There are supposedly Egyptian hieroglyphs, but these are invented. The author also indulges in creating words as he needs them. Given the license offered by the dreamscape, the illustrations are replete with unusual symbolism. By some accounts, the work carefully documents the structures, themes and habits of the psyche, and gives a masterful reading of the dreaming mind. The book itself is as difficult to interpret as a dream. It was like this by design. And by design, the tone of the text is dense, oppressively, cloyingly effusive, florid, overdone, abounding in sensual superlatives. It is not, in truth, easy reading. It is, in fact, dull to the point of being monotonous. Despite the promise of the scenario, the tale itself is told in a tedious stream of adjectival passion. Here's a short sample of Polyfilo describing some of the features of a place in his dream. In the centre of this admirable area, I saw an extraordinary fountain spurting clear water through narrow pipes as high as the closing hedge. The water fell back into a wide shell of fine amethyst, 3 paces in diameter and 3 inches thick, diminishing to 1 inch at the rim of this excellent tub. All around it, aquatic monsters could be seen, perfectly carved in bas-relief. The ancient craftsman never managed to achieve such splendid work in hard stone as this admirable and complex ornamentation. This one was expertly fixed on a splendid pillar of jasper with many veins beautifully intersecting one another, with diaphanous inlays the colour of turbid seawater. It was a noble artefact made from 2 throated vases placed on one another and separated by a wide knot. It stood erect, fastened to the centre of a circular plinth of greenish serpentine. This plinth was raised 5 inches above the flat pavement and was surrounded, as was the surrounding rim, of porphyry that was curiously decorated with fine wave mouldings. Beneath the basin and around the pillar, 4 golden harpies with rapacious taloned feet rested on the surface of the serpentine plinth. Their back parts were against the pillar, one directly opposite the other, and their unfolded wings rose towards the violet lip of the basin. They had the faces of virgins and hair that flowed down their necks onto their shoulders, while their heads did not reach the underside of the basin. The dreaming narrator is in a state of arousal, and everything he encounters is shot through with eros, made optimum by eros. The narrator's descriptions are both loving and lurid, eroticised, intensely detailed, idealised, enraptured descriptions of non-erotic objects. He could be describing the contours of a woman for whom he lusts. It has all the adjectival enthusiasm of pornography, but it's about architectural features. The dream world here is a world transformed by eros, such that everything is an object of desire. It is a treatise, then, on the nature of the Platonic eros, the realm of erotic forms ruled by Venus Aphrodite. Because of eros, we see our lover as a god or goddess and are enthralled by their perfection. In Polyfilo's dream world, everything is like that. Everything presents an erotic perfection, even buildings, architectural ornaments, everything. And thus is the narrator enthralled. I say the Platonic eros because this is a Renaissance dream world of Platonic forms, a lucid dreaming, not the usual sludge of the depraved unconscious of the common man. That is, it's not Freudian. This is an eros that lifts you up into illumination, not drags you down into neurosis. There are those who regard it as a work of high philosophy. Salvador Dali had no right to admire it. It is not in any way Dali-esque. The dream world of Polyfilo is not surreal. It is super real. His dream doesn't take him into a murky unconscious, but rather into a realm of lucid vision. The surreal is a modern industrial phenomenon. The Renaissance doesn't do surreal. Strange, unique, unexpected, playful, allegorical, cryptic, fabulously inventive, but not surreal. Much of Renaissance art too is homoerotic, but the themes of phallicism in Hypernerotomachia are resolutely heterosexual, but importantly devoted to erotic fulfillment rather than fertility and reproduction. Notably, Polya asserts a woman's joy in sexual satisfaction, because the transformations and rewards of Eros are for women as much as for men, as Venus Aphrodite, who presides over the work, would insist. The centrepiece of the work is when the heroes see Venus unveiled and naked. This is the beatific vision. But this makes it a difficult work to assess in our own times because we stand too close to those issues ourselves, and we are very likely to project our own preoccupations into the past. Thus it is that certain people want to see in this work a prefiguring of all sorts of modern sexual ideologies, and in particular modern politicisations of sex. It invites, that is, the most tawdry of contemporary sociological commentary, and rather than elevating us out of our own mindset, there are those who see nothing but themselves in it. It is generally best to sidestep modern interpretations and to let the illustrations and the text speak unimpeded. It is important, in fact, to filter out our own prejudices and conceits, such as the very common conceit that we as modern people somehow liberated sex, and to surrender to a far more subtle mind from the Quattrocento. It is very rich. The place to start is the motto, Amor vincit omnia, love conquers all. The motto comes from Virgil, but he had it, omnia vincit amor. The Hypernerotomachia has deliberately played with the word order. This sort of subtle play is everywhere in this text. The aroused text, if we can call it that, the phallic logos, is notoriously overwritten, and young writers in any genre are well advised not to write like Polyfilo's dream. The author's genius is certainly opaque, and just as certainly multi-levelled. It is not genuinely eccentric, it is rather a highly designed literary folly, designed in every aspect. It is the juncture of a dozen different arts. The illustrations are especially worthy and have been unusually influential given the obscurity of the text. As an artefact, as a book of the 1400s from early printing, it's a masterpiece. It is a typographical wonder with credit due to the publisher. It embodies that Renaissance notion of the cosmos complete in itself, a self-contained work here in nested dreams where all the arts meet. It is also itself the meeting of a coincidentia oppositorum, which is where it invites an alchemical reading. Matters high and low come together here. It suggests Eros as a spiritual path, but transposed into the temple of dreams. The narrative lends itself to initiatory readings. The text and the illustrations set out the steps of an initiation. There have been, real or imaginary, secret societies devoted to this path, notably the so-called society of angels. It has so far largely escaped the dissection by the vultures of modernity who peck out all the things they think contributed to their own benighted times. It's too out of phase for that. It's not proto-modern or proto-anything, although that wouldn't stop PhD candidates trying to construe it as scientific. It unfortunately lends itself to Da Vinci Code sort of silliness, because we don't know what else to do with Renaissance mysteries. This is a key work of the erotic mysteries, and in our century we are now a long way from knowing what to do with that, and the less said about architecture in our own times the better. You might think that in these days of sexual liberation we would be all over a work like this. In fact, its eroticism is unfamiliar. It is a particular development of the eroticism of courtly love. The eroticism of industrial man might be Freudian, but the eroticism of courtly love is essentially Platonic. We only associate the word Platonic with homoerotic chastity, but more generally in the Western tradition, Plato, rediscovered in the Renaissance, proposes eros as a mystical path. The mythic tension in the work is between Diana Artemis and Venus Aphrodite. Polyfilo isn't transported into an underworld of libidinal neurosis. His erotomania is a Platonic madness that transports him to the temple of the goddess of love. It is hard from where we stand to know how to approach the Hypernerotomachia. It is so completely unlike other works. The plot is sensational. The text is hard work. The language in the original is made almost unreadable. The relation between text and illustration is uniquely symbiotic. It is so deeply elusive, you need to be a Renaissance polymath to appreciate it. It is, in the end, a fabulous work. Fabulous is the right word, having the quality of a fable. And by conception, it is in many ways outside of our stride. Modern accounts and journal articles all seem inadequate to its complexity. Placing it in its genre, romance, hardly helps. Modern books are simply not of this nature. It is best to leave the author unknown and respect their anonymity. It seems an important device. It is in any case one of the great works of dream literature, and it is the dream within the dream and the encounter with Venus Aphrodite herself that renders it lucid and makes it visionary.